Nicholas KUHN is looking at Jota, Matt O'Reilly and going, here, I've done that. It's Scotty Sinclair I'm after.
You can look back to even last season. See if Celtic are playing like that for even 10 minutes in a Champions League game, we do not come back and win that 3-1. We absolutely don't. We'd lose probably 4 or 5.
You brought it into football and everyone in that stadium who paid their money is allowed to make their voice heard. That's the rules, and if you don't like it, you'll need to come up with some other way to work it. Was that Celtic's best Champions League performance of all time? That's this week on 20 Minute Tims. I'm your host Jamie and I'm joined by Melly.
Yes.
And Stephen.
Hello.
And before we begin, let me tell you about Substack. We've noticed that there's lots of Celtic content out there and there's some of it now appearing on Substack. So, to make things easier, if you like your Celtic content on Substack, you can pick up 20 Minute Tims there. We'll have match reactions for every single Celtic game in the form of podcasts, and we're going to have extra writing on 20minutetims.substack.com. There'll be a link in every bio, so if you're a Substack person and that's where you like to get your extra content, we've made things easier for you and you can catch us there.
This is in addition to Patreon. This is not a move to Substack or anything.
Correct.
So this is in addition to all the platforms you could already find us on.
It's because
into Substack.
People keep inventing new platforms. So we're on Patreon, we're on Apple, we're on Spotify, and now we're on Substack. That's where you can get all the extra stuff. But the OG is patreon.com/20minutetims. Martin Melly, where do you begin with that performance?
One for the ages, wasn't it? It's the absolute apex of Celtic in the Champions League. It's what the European nights are for me. Celtic going up against a team where you thought we could easily take a beating here, but they went out and went toe-to-toe with them, and it was Leipzig who came away with a broken toe.
Hey, doesn't work, Stephen.
What a preposterous image to begin the podcast. And I've just noticed that is the first time the name Leipzig has been mentioned so far in the podcast so far. So we are referring to the RB Leipzig, an extraordinary performance by Celtic. And now, with the way the fixtures are falling, and we come out the same time every week, unless you're on Patreon, of course, where we've already explained, so that's where to get our immediate thoughts of the game. But we come out on a very specific time every single week. We come out Tuesday morning, and the last time this fell after a Champions League game was Borussia Dortmund.
Yeah.
So that gave us an entire week to sit and stew on the Borussia Dortmund game, and a lot of the comments we received were, why are you still talking about this? As if we want to hear about this again. Let's see if it's still quite as vehement this time around, now that we're a week on from the best Champions League, arguably, performance that we've seen in many a year. It was really something else, and Melly makes a good point. He used the word apex of Celtic's Champions League performances there. I think in some ways that might be as good as it gets for a Celtic team in the Champions League. Now, I don't say that to be defeatist. I don't say that to be like, well, we're never going to get any better than that. What I mean specifically by that is that we met being the best team on the night with playing against a proper European team. That met just about in the middle there. I think if we go further up the ladder, what you might get is that Celtic can pull off results, but can they be the better team on the night? Maybe not. We might be looking at something closer to what we saw with Barcelona all those years ago, where managed to pull off a miraculous result on the night.
5% possession.
With 5% possession.
Yes.
19 passes completed in the entire game to Barcelona's 1950. Yeah,
see that whoever created that fake graphic about those fake stats, well done, man, because it gets quoted as if it's gospel, that fake stat about 99 shots to 3 shots and all this sort of stuff.
Charlie Mulgrew was there and he was wheeling it out recently as well.
And he's on a podcast going, we beat Barcelona with 11% possession. Charlie, it's fake.
It's unbelievable, but well done.
Well done, man.
It has well and truly stuck. But what I'm getting with that is that if we were to play like a Real Madrid or Man City or Bayern Munich or whatever, Celtic may well be capable of getting a result. But would we be able to put in a performance where you come away thinking we battered them? We absolutely battered them. And that's what I mean by this might be as good a performance as we're ever likely to see in the Champions League. It was something else. Genuinely, I was extremely proud of that performance. Even a week ago now, on from it, it's still a nice wee buzz off it. It was one of those ones where I got up the next day and thought, that's right, that happened last night. And I usually only get that after like cup finals or beating Rangers or whatever. It's been a while since I've got up after the Champions League and thought, what a night that was.
It's just the context, isn't it? When woke up after Dortmund, like, happened last night, didn't it? And now you're waking up today going, oh, that happened last night. It was such a difference in quality.
Look, I think the one person I want to talk about following the Red Bull game, first of all, is Brendan Rodgers. I sat here, and we all did, and we were all pretty scathing about Brendan Rodgers after the Dortmund game and after the performance, and criticising his approach to the game and all that. And I think, honestly, that's fair enough. I think if you go into a game and you get smashed the way Celtic got smashed, you have to question the manager and you have to question his approach to these things. But what it's now not starting to look like, what that does now look like to me is exactly what Brendan Rodgers said it was. It was a game that got away for Celtic far too much. That wasn't how Brendan Rodgers performs in Europe. That was just a game that got away for us. And it's easy to say that after it when you have nothing else to compare it to. But after Atalanta, and specifically after Red Bull, I was just so impressed by the way the manager set the team up, the confidence he had in the players. You could see at times the sort of mechanical nature of the way Celtic approached the game. We were building up. Oh, we can't go that way. Right, the ball goes back. Oh, we can't go this way. The ball goes back. Out to Callum McGregor. Looks up. No, do you know what? We'll just keep it. And you're just like, this is... There's something qualitatively different about the way we won that game compared to how we've won other games in Europe, because it was manager and team. With the best will in the world, no manager sets his team out to do what Neil Lennon did against Barcelona. Win a fluky bounce on a missed header and Tony Watt puts it away. Now, sometimes that's the way you have to win games like that. Like, really, that's the only way Celtic were ever going to beat that Barcelona team, with a performance like that.
Well, that's why I'm separating results and performances when I say, could this be the kind of pinnacle of it? Because you will get those on occasion, but that's a very different performance.
Totally, but I'm talking. So, aye, but the difference between that and this is repeatable. This is like this is a template that we can follow against other teams, and this is not a fluke. This is not a one-off. This is what the manager set out to do, and this is what the players were required to do, and they were all brilliant. Callum McGregor was absolutely exceptional in the game, and these are the sorts of... This is what you want to see from Celtic in Europe, a team holding their own. See that second goal we scored? That's one of my favourite Celtic in Europe goals, just absolutely hounding the life out of Red Bull. They didn't like it. No. They did not like it when we...
They're going to like being called Red Bull repeatedly on this podcast.
That's their own fault. They made their bed. They can sleep in it. So they didn't like that. And that second goal was just one of our favourites. And Brendan Rodgers just deserves so much credit for the way he's built this Celtic team and the approach to the game. And do you know what? He's a man of his word. He came out after Dortmund and went, that's not the way we play. He never said it was a fluke, but he basically went, that's not Celtic in Europe. And people questioned him. I questioned him on the podcast. 2 ties later, you're like, wait a minute, he's right. That's Celtic in Europe.
That's the difficulty, isn't it? Because I tried to defend as much as you can defend a 7-1 defeat by saying, look, a lot of the goals after we went 2-1 down were Celtic playing passes that instantly gave Dortmund a chance. And if Celtic cut that out, we can do that. And it's why guys like Brendan Rodgers and Ange Postecoglou play the way they do, because when it works so well, and it doesn't matter the level of opposition. What Stephen said is correct. There's going to be times, we've seen it against Real Madrid. Celtic went up against Real Madrid, played well, but still came away getting a 3-0 defeat. Whereas this game, Celtic can play well, but they can beat these type of teams. And as Stephen says, this is probably the team that's right on the cusp of that next level. Would be those teams up that Celtic probably would struggle to play their game against just because they're better teams.
Similar level to Borussia Dortmund as well. A very comparable level there, surely.
And I think it does show the Dortmund game's a freak result, but that's going to happen in these games if you don't do what you set out to do. And I think it's one of those games where Brendan Rodgers set up his team, told them to do exactly this, and they went out and done it. They conceded a goal from a corner, which can happen. Otherwise, Celtic were brilliant in what they'd done. They passed the ball, they pressed, like you were saying, Jamie. I think that was the reason Greg Taylor was brought in, because he was a safer bet, because he got a wee bit of stick in the first half because he turned back and Celtic kept the ball. So there is reasons why Brendan Rodgers done that, but I just think that this was the sort of culmination of everything Brendan Rodgers has talked about. He plays this way because when it works against teams like this, Celtic can get a victory. We've seen it now, and Lord, it was good.
There's identifiable progress as well, as far as I can see. And we talk about that a lot and what it actually means, because often football can go up and down from one week to the next. Not generally in Celtic's case, because in this season they've been an absolute winning machine, by and large, apart from the Borussia Dortmund game and then a draw against Aberdeen. A draw against Atalanta as well, but that kind of folds into what we're talking about. A very impressive European performance. But there was a time in the Leipzig game where Celtic had conceded it first, and usually that's alarm bells for Celtic in Europe. And
we were definitely spooked.
Yeah, so for a time after that, maybe just before and after it, Celtic went to pieces a little bit in terms of their composure and their ability on the ball. I think Engels gave the ball away a couple of times, so did Dyson. Trusty gave one away in midfield, and we were getting repeated corners. There was one shortly after the goal where it went all the way. I think someone headed it just narrowly past the far post, and I thought, right, well, here we go. Here's Celtic in the Champions League again. So the progress, as far as I can see it, and again, it's not just that it's a one-off game, it's that you can look back to even last season. See if Celtic are playing like that for even 10 minutes in a Champions League game, we do not come back and win that 3-1. No. We absolutely don't. We'd lose probably 4 or 5-1 at home. So that to me looks like very clear progress that we've made in a very short space of time, because it's something that comes up time and again on these podcasts, is that just don't do this Celtic in Europe stuff. Yeah. Don't let the heads go down. Don't concede multiple goals all one after the other. Don't get someone sent off in the first half. That could easily have happened. Someone could easily have panicked during that time where Celtic were kind of falling apart. I remember a moment, and I watched the game back, weirdly, they were still showing the replay from the second corner that almost resulted in a goal, so they didn't show this thing, but I commented to Melly about it at the game. Kasper Schmeichel took a goal kick while Leipzig players were still inside our box, so he passed it out to Taylor, and Taylor had nowhere to go. He can't go back the way because our box is full of opposition players, and I just thought, this is crazy stuff. Like, everybody just calmed down. So it didn't show the replay of it in the game, but all of this was happening. It would have been the easiest thing in the world for somebody to end up just panicking and losing their man, and all of a sudden we're 2-0 down at home and the game's completely gone. That didn't happen. Nothing could have been further from the truth. What an impressive, not only an impressive overall performance, but a comeback performance at home. When do we see that in the Champions League?
It's just one of the best. It's one of the best performances in the Champions, and it makes you so proud because it looks like Celtic belong. And like, for ages we've wanted to be that up and coming, pretty left field Champions League team that causes ripples throughout the tournament.
A hipster's choice. Do we want to be a hipster's choice in Europe? Yeah.
We wanted to be that because so many times we've come up against those teams and they've beaten us, and we've looked at they're like, they've just got a right good manager and some right good players in there. Why can't that be us? And this season, it does look like it's us. Yeah. It honestly looks like this is the Champions League team that we've wanted to be for so long. And it's where does it rank though? Where does that performance or result rank? Because see, in many ways, people might disagree with me here, and let me know in the comments. Feed that algorithm anyway if you want, right? But there was something Gordon Strachan about that performance, and Gordon Strachan in Europe, the control about it, the keep ball, the way it was very, very careful with the ball, and we weren't giving it away cheaply. There was an element of Gordon Strachan about that, and it reminded me a wee bit of that AC Milan game. Was that 2007? When maybe Scott McDonald scored?
Yes, Dida with a horrendous injury.
R.I.P.
R.I.P.
Gone but not forgotten, Dida.
What did both of those games have in common then? Pitch invader.
Oh.
Hey, keep your arsehole kids off the park. Nobody cares but you. Nobody likes it. Also, dying minutes of a Champions League game are trying to see this thing out. Everyone's watching the clock and someone sends their kid on for a photo.
And the key word there is sends, because no child that small is making that decision on their own to run on the pitch. But to be serious for a single second,
and Santa's watching.
Now to be serious for a single second. It's so the ball was in play. It's so dangerous doing that as well. There are loads of massive super athletes all running about charging into each other, and you send a tiny boy on there to just the ball's in play at the time. That's an incredibly dangerous thing to do. Please stop doing it. It's
maybe all it's going to take is somebody just getting donked, some kid just getting donked right out of the park, and then they'll never do it again. Anyway, Melly, where does it rank for you? What's it like?
We've had the games like AC Milan, Juventus, Man United, where Celtic have won the game, but like we're saying, there wasn't that dominant performance. The two dominant ones that stand out for me in the Champions League would be Lyon and Benfica.
Who scored in that Benfica game?
Celtic won 3-0, and I'm ruling this game out. Stephen Pearson scored an absolute screamer, and then a couple of G's or something like that.
NA.
Trialist. I'll rule that one out for that. But I think the Lyon
It was
game...
Kenny Miller, by the way. If you don't get this joke, we're refusing to say the name of Kenny Miller. Thanks.
You've ruined it. So I would go with the Lyon game. I think in that game, Celtic were incredible. Henrik Larsson, Chris Sutton. When Sutton scores, you can see him mouth to Larsson, what a ball from his cross. It was 2 crosses from Larsson. I think that was complete because Lyon were a genuine Champions League semi-finalist team.
Yeah.
Year on year, Celtic took them to town that night and destroyed them. And I think the same can be said here because there was no onslaught towards the end. There was no... They scored from a corner. They had a decent one from when Trusty gave it away. That was a decent chance. But apart from that, I can't remember them having many clear-cut chances. They had the odd snapshot here or there, but nothing that you thought. And the way Celtic played towards the end, it was as if they were playing against 10 men because they'd just play it across to the right back, move it back inside, go out the other side, and the team just knew exactly what they were doing. So I can't remember one as dominant as this, and the 3-1 was the icing on the cake as well because Celtic were so deserving of the victory, but also for Real HATATE to score the goal, a guy deserved it. I thought it was his best performance in a Celtic jersey.
It's difficult to compare across eras, of course, because we're not only talking about a different era of Celtic teams, we're talking about a different era of those teams as well. So it's hard to put in the full context and have sort of conjure to mind the perception of what we should have done in those games. But where I would put this game possibly ahead of those is that Benfica are a team that even since, again, things fluctuate, things go up and down, things change, other teams dominate in those leagues. Maybe other teams will take over in terms of the Portuguese league, but I'm just using those as an example. Like Benfica, Ajax, clubs like that are where we want Celtic to be competing. Like famously, over the last several years in the Champions League, these are the teams that we should be sort of emulating in some ways, trying to compete. Those, not necessarily the absolute big guns, but the second, possibly third tier of European big guns. Celtic, we should be competing with those. Lyon maybe to a lesser extent because they were very good at the time as well. But Leipzig are probably a team that Celtic shouldn't necessarily be competing with, and you'd only really need to look at the perception in Germany about that. That was a game they were expected, that they were basically demanding
their
they win.
official Twitter account tweeted before the game, time for a win. That's how confident they were.
That was, and even the context of this game as well. I think I said last week that what worried me about it was that that's a must-win game for Leipzig. So this isn't like them taking it easy or anything like that. I think Celtic could have treated that game as of course we want to win all the home games, but not necessarily all that damaging if we don't necessarily win that game, right? So Leipzig had to win that game or they'd be staring down the barrel of 4 straight Champions League defeats, which they've now got, and that's not good enough for a club like them. I know they're not Man City or Real Madrid. They're not necessarily, I keep saying the word necessarily, but they're not one of those historic European giants, but they're a European force these days, and they're well-resourced, they're well-moneyed, they've got a system in place, a well-established system for years now that has been developing into making them a Champions League mainstay. Celtic haven't got anything like that. I mean, we've basically just sort of lurched from one season, from one manager to the next, hoping to do our best. Celtic probably, when you look at it, shouldn't be competing with a team like that, but went out and dominated them and were by far, in my opinion, the best team on the night. So that, to me, is compelling reason enough to make it. Maybe, I don't know, people will have their preferences, and by all means get in touch, put it in the comments what your favourite is, but that's all compelling evidence for me to make it up there with any of these performances.
Gave Jerry a bloody nose and sent him packing, Martin Melly.
It's like you were saying earlier, it follows on from the Atalanta game, doesn't it? Because the Dortmund game was a Sawyern to take. Atalanta, we've seen improvements and we've seen minor tweaks, even if Brendan Rodgers says there wasn't many. And with this one, it's like the Atalanta game wasn't a fluke. This shows that Celtic kind of know what they're doing now, and getting a draw away to the Europa League winners and then going and beating a German team who are sitting second in the league, it's kind of what dreams are made of at this level. They're not, as you say, storied clubs with history, but these are 2 good teams that are very dominant where they're
new
playing.
Money.
Yeah, new money where they're playing just now. They're very good teams, and Celtic are going against them. And look, we should be getting beat off these teams. I thought Leipzig was sort of one on the cusp. I can maybe get a draw there and it would be a decent result, but to go out and blow them away was beyond my wildest dreams. We would, if we had got a 2-1 and we'd got a couple of goals, but they weren't fluke goals. These were goals that Celtic work on all the time, getting the ball out to the right hand side, KUHN cutting in, and then the second one will probably, like you're saying, it's one of your favourites, but it'll be one of Brendan Rodgers' favourites because the amount of times Dyson either shut somebody down without winning the ball, which means somebody else closes down. HATATE, Taylor was there as well. They're just relentless pressing. They didn't like it up them, and Celtic get the ball in. Dyson with a lovely dummy, and there's KUHN again. It's just everything Celtic, sort of Brendan Rodgers. Do you know when that goal went in, do you know what I thought?
What?
That's a Brendan team. That's everything he wants, isn't it? The pressing, the composure to find the pass from HATATE, your fullback getting the cross for the other winger to come in. It's just everything Brendan wanted.
That's 2 mentions for that goal, and it's, at this point it's worthy of mention that everyone got to do their stuff in that goal. So there was a bit of magic from HATATE in the wing, a wee bit of patience waiting for the right ball. Greg Taylor popping up in an attacking position like we know we can, hasn't necessarily been the greatest of form recently, but he popped up in an attacking position and created a goal. Dyson got to swipe at the ball wildly and play it straight into the path of KUHN, who knocks it in. So including Brendan Rodgers, he got to do his stuff in that goal as well, because that was football ball, never mind barrage ball.
It was Melly's mentioned him a couple of times, and we've mentioned him every single week on the podcast, but it must have been sweet revenge for Nicholas KUHN. Leipzig game, Kilmarnock game, he's just completely unstoppable.
Yeah.
I've honestly, it's verging on never seen anything like it, and I don't mean to be hyperbolic, because there have been better players at Celtic than Nicholas KUHN, right? I prefer Jota. I think Jota was a better footballer. Everyone will have their favourites, but Nicholas KUHN simply cannot stop scoring goals, or at the very least assisting numerous goals in games.
No, I've never quite seen anything like it. It was just a couple of weeks ago where we spoke about the numbers he was putting up in terms of just comparing him to Jota and Matt O'Reilly, about how, not directly comparing them as players or even saying that he's better or worse than them. It was purely to illustrate that he is having a better start to the season than any of them did. Yeah. And those guys were putting up ridiculous numbers as well, assists and goals and everything. So he's gone way beyond that. Since I said that, he's gone way beyond that and has scored 2 brilliant goals in the Champions League.
Yeah, he's taking things off now, isn't he?
A crucial one against Kilmarnock as well. And I really see that thing that he did against Kilmarnock, where that touch, it takes him across the defence and they can't touch him. They just sort of need to lean back. He does that so often. Watch how often he does that. He's got this instinct for it, for feeling where the defender is and taking the right touch, so that defender, you've got no choice there. You can either back off or basically bring him down. Those are the 2 choices there. So good at it, and the finishing is unbelievable. But with those goals in the Champions League, has he elevated himself above Jota now? It's hard to say. So Jota was here for 2 seasons. This is KUHN's, he's only been here a half and a bit now, half a season and a bit.
He's a completely different player to the guy that was here last season.
Completely different. And I heard Joe Hart in commentary when I was watching it back. Obviously, I was at the game, so I didn't hear the commentary. Joe Hart was very good, always entertaining, just endearing, just a great presence in commentary. But he was talking about how Brendan Rodgers kept saying that to him at half-time during games. So when he wasn't really performing all that well towards the end of last season, before he properly announced himself in the Celtic team, Brendan Rodgers just took him aside at half-time and kept saying to him, shows what you're made of, shows why you're here. We all know what you've got, and he just wasn't really coming for him.
How bad are these wisdom teeth?
I know, unbelievable. But it's like, maybe, what does he need then? Maybe a goal against Rangers, a goal in a cup final or something like that.
I'd be astonished if he doesn't do both of those this season. He'll tick every box.
You'd be, at this point, now watching him play, you'd be foolish to not back him to do those things, because he's been unbelievable this season. And the numbers, again, we keep pointing to them. He's going to get to that stage where we'll run out of things to say about him, because we're talking about him every week, because he's breaking records left and right. But it's comical stuff that he's putting in, like 10 goals and 11 assists or something. I know he got that one for Callum McGregor's goal against Kilmarnock as well.
The spurious assists.
Yeah, but he has been absolutely unbelievable.
I think the difficulty with the Ange era was brilliant, wasn't it? We got into the Champions League, but we never got that victory there. Brendan Rodgers has surpassed that this season already, hasn't he? And I always speak about it. We never got that Fraser Forster game from Joe Hart. Joe Hart was a brilliant keeper, but he never had that game. Jota never had that game in the Champions League. He's had it against Rangers. He's scored multiple goals against them, which
classics as well.
Yeah, Nicholas KUHN hasn't got yet, but he's done it in the Champions League, and I would say Nicholas KUHN is looking at Jota, Matt O'Reilly, and going, here, I've done that. It's Scotty Sinclair I'm after. His first season, he blew us away, didn't he, with the amount of goals he scored. Didn't he get that many assists probably, but KUHN is rapidly approaching that. And if he keeps this up, he seems like just a right-sided Scott Sinclair. And it's not the same goal he's scoring. The tap in at the back post, the one where he cuts inside, the one against Kilmarnock, like you're saying, it's like something, again, what we say, it's like you see other teams' players doing this, and like, why can we have a player like that? We seem to be picking up these players and having all this stuff now. It's the way it should be. It's mental what happens when you spend a bit of money in it.
Yeah, when you get your recruitment correct.
See, just citing the names of like Matt O'Reilly and Jota and all that, it's again testament to how well Celtic have adjusted from the loss of these players who we've lost both of those players and in some ways kicked on. It's not easy. I heard a podcast, an English-based podcast recently talking about Brighton and how well they're doing this season, because everyone talks about all the players they lose. They obviously sell players for big money every season, but another way to look at that is they lose their best players all the time and they keep having to tick away and having to change manager quite a lot. The recruitment is excellent. So it's probably important to once in a while point to Celtic and say, look, we have lost our best player in each of the last 2 seasons. We've kept a core of very, very talented players as well. Kyogo, Cameron Carter-Vickers, Callum McGregor, all these guys are brilliant. But the kind of talisman of each season, the kind of main standout that chips in with the goals, we've lost them each time. And now they've kicked on with a couple of, I mean, what was KUHN 2.4 million or something
like that,
outrageous like that, and in some ways it actually looks better than these. It's unbelievable.
And that's kind of similar to what Brighton do. Celtic are in a position where that's always going to be the case, isn't it? The next one teams will be looking at KUHN, and you can't blame them for that.
No.
What he's doing is extraordinary now. I would hope he'd be here for another season or so, but that 5.5-year deal's looking business.
We were slating that 5.5-year deal last season.
That's right.
I admit, I was on a podcast and I was like, look, if this guy was on loan, nobody would want to keep him.
Yeah.
And you'd be kicking yourself if he then went to another team like us and was tearing it up. You're like, we had this guy on loan last season and he's scoring goals in the Champions League and he can't stop scoring and he's linked with big clubs. We'd be absolutely kicking ourselves.
It's the player we thought we were getting, was it? Or the player we'd hoped we were getting?
Yeah.
And when we're getting that now, it just seems he can do a bit.
I'd go as far as to say, like, I don't think anyone had really any idea that the quality displays he's putting on, this is what Nicholas KUHN from Rapid Vienna was. I think he's maybe the player that lots of other clubs thought he could be. See, when he got his moves to, where did he go? Bayern. He was at
Leipzig to Ajax, I think originally.
Ajax. This is the player they thought they were getting, and now we are reaping the benefits of that.
Quite an interesting contrast as well, because we spoke a lot about that January 2024 transfer window and the quality and all that, and the only 2 players brought in were KUHN and Ida, and it looked like a complete waste of time. It looked like a complete waste of a month. And especially with KUHN, Ida was the standout. He was the guy who was turning up and scoring the big goals. Exactly, yeah. So he was the guy who was scoring big goals and making himself a must sign at the time, whereas KUHN was just sort of floating along, and as we've discussed many times, just not particularly standing out, not looking terrible, but not doing anything to highlight why he was brought to the club in the first place. Complete role reversal at this point. Not that I'm having a go at Ida, but you would never have convinced me at the time that KUHN was going to be gone to be the outstanding one of the 2.
Oh, it was a pre-season for him. But what I was saying about Brighton and Celtic there is, Brendan Rodgers said at the start of the season, didn't he, that we're not going to replace Matt O'Reilly like for like.
No.
But this is what we've been crying out for years. You're going to lose your best player, so replace him, and Celtic have done that with Engels, but they've also improved other positions in the squad, and this is what happens. Celtic can do this cycle. It's not going to be perfect all the time, but if they can sell a guy for 25 million and spread that across three or four positions to improve them, these are the things you get. Celtic have went out, spent money on the team this season, and they're getting the benefits of it straight away.
Yeah.
We thought it might take a wee bit longer to click because they were brought in so late, but we're seeing that, and you're making the money back. You get 2 million for that one.
I know, unbelievable. Another player that's worth mentioning, we've mentioned KUHN and we've got HATATE, and I think they're just wonderful players. I see when HATATE popped the ball through that guy's legs and then turned up and played that out to Kyogo or up to Kyogo during the game, I was like, this is peak Real HATATE. This is what we like seeing again. He's been a player that's been criticised for being on and off the boils, quiet in some games, didn't start the season well, all the rest of it, but he's absolutely cooking right now.
Oh, tremendous. That is what you love about him, doesn't it?
And the Kelly game as well.
Yeah, He was brilliant against Aberdeen as well.
Oh,
He
yeah,
carried
yeah.
it into that. It's like 6-0 then going and beating Leipzig 3-1. It's absolutely tremendous stuff. And HATATE was arguably man of the match in both of those games
Yep.
for me. The Leipzig game is the game we will always probably refer back to as real HATATE. We've probably before that had that 3-0 game against Rangers. This is the one where he's sort of elevated himself, and he's probably done himself a wee bit because he is a wee bit inconsistent, but this is why you play the guy, because he can come up with that. There's nobody in the team that can do that. Struggling to think of anybody we've had recently who can do that as well. Everybody has their different strengths, but Real HATATE and that blend alongside Engels and McGregor, it was a perfect blend in there. Absolutely sensational, and just dragging it back, flicking it through a guy's legs, and then it's no the end of it. He plays a good ball through it to somebody, so I thought he was sensational. And even if somebody else had got that tap in, I'd still be sitting here going, he was the best player in the park that night. I thought he was absolutely sensational.
It kind of shows how possibly ill-judged the conversations that a lot of people would have been having, including us probably at the time, about going into a Champions League campaign. Can you afford to carry a guy like HATATE? Is it maybe better going with Bernardo in there for a bit more?
Possibly in away games.
Yeah, for a bit more protection of the ball and a bit more physicality in there. But then look, sometimes
like it's sports entertainment. Yeah. Guys that like the place up.
He's an electrifying man in sports entertainment. Yeah, but that's exactly it. Sometimes it's not always obvious going in, and you do have the discussions about do you want to kind of firm things up a wee bit in midfield? Do you want to kind of keep things compact? Maybe HATATE he's the sacrifice there. Then his true value just reveals itself when you get into games
and that's
like that.
Brendan again, isn't it? Because a lot of other managers would have thought, right, well, do you know what?
Yeah.
This guy's a bit of a maverick. We can't have him on the pitch. But because Brendan likes the football played in a certain kind of way, Brendan's thought, nah, we need that little sprinkle of stardust in midfield.
And my thought process at the time was, yes, can you make things more difficult for the opposition by taking out HATATE and putting in a more physical midfielder? Not that the other guys aren't capable of things either, but do you, in doing so, do you remove the opportunity or the chance that he will pull off something magical like that? If you take him out the team, is it too much of a cost to the potential of you turning a scrappy 1-1 creditable draw in the Champions League? Is HATATE the difference between turning that into a win, and that's why you basically need to play him?
There's also the sort of factor that we're sort of accustomed to now, that sort of take the piss out of it a bit, but what Brendan Rodgers says is true. A Brendan team is a team that you're not going to be a passenger in that. See, if you're not chasing back and you're not pressing, he's not going to play you because the rest of it falls down. And we can talk about HATATE's quality, and he was absolutely brilliant, but he's also playing a massive part in that second goal because he is pressing, he is working with his teammates, and that is that extra bit after it, that composure, to have a look up and just play that no-look pass into Greg Taylor. We have players that can do that, but he married the work rate along with that quality on Tuesday night, and it was just sensational to watch. I thought he was absolutely brilliant.
And Celtic, we continued that form somewhat into the Kilmarnock game. It's always going to be a more difficult game, but I think to battle the way that we battled in the Kilmarnock game, we had to suffer in that game. It was a complete change of gear. Melly, you're laughing.
Champions League to Rugby Park.
I know.
And it doesn't. Arne Engels must be like, seriously?
What a horrible come down that is.
Honestly, see, I think the come down for me is when you turn on the television, you see the sheen on the pitch, and then you see empty stands, and you think, we have this complaint all the time on this podcast. These teams have got no right to complain. You said that we were rewatching the game, Stephen. Don't talk about budgets when you simply... You can't even sell the seats that were there. And then
£33.50 my ticket was.
There's honestly, see if you're a fan of another club, let me know if that's what they charge St Mirren and St Johnstone to go to these games, because I sincerely doubt it is. I think they bumped the prices right up for Celtic fans. But more importantly, for other people, everyone got to have their annual get-together / moan about minute silences and lack of minute silences.
It's the most wonderful time of the year, you might say, yeah.
So it's Armistice Day today. That was Remembrance Sunday. Long after the event, they decided to force minute silences on a football game. So they're inserting politics into football right at that moment. This is my personal view. So you can have your minute silence at church, you can have it in the morning, you can have it at 11 in the morning, but now they wait till 3 o'clock and have it at a football game. So right away, they're inserting politics into football. And the thing you always hear in this country is, can we not keep politics out of football?
Yeah.
What people mean by that is, can we not keep your politics out of football?
Yes.
That's all they mean. They don't want their politics kept out of football. They want your politics kept out of football. So Kilmarnock have their minute silence, as Derek McInnes called it after the game. Absolutely spewing. And Celtic fans exercise their right to free speech and protest that.
Yeah.
Now, and then, but it's the same every year. They have the minute silence. We protest the minute silence. They moan about us protesting the minute silence. And then we have a laugh / a moan about them moaning about us having the minute silence. And really, this is what they want, though, isn't it? This is what everyone wants. They want free speech. And in this day and age, when with everything that's going on, free speech is like the thing that's held as the pinnacle. And Celtic fans were exercising their right to free speech. You invited us along. You know how many of the Celtic support feel about these things, and they simply let their voice be known. And I don't agree with everything the Green Brigade do. There's a lot of stuff I've not agreed with the Green Brigade have done, but I think this protest in the minute silence in this way, excuse me, is probably one of the most useful things they'll do, because people, younger people and people of the younger generation will be going, right, so what is this Aidan McInnes? And why are the Green Brigade protesting? What is bloody Sunday? And they'll be looking these things up and they'll be educating themselves, and it will allow them to form an opinion. And I think ultimately that's what pisses people off. They don't want other people going and finding out things that they don't want them to find out. They don't want people looking things up and educating themselves. It's a nonsense, and we have it every single year, and it'll rumble on to Thursday, then we'll all forget about it, and then we'll meet up here next year and we'll just have the same conversation. It's boring now.
I'm buzzing for it next year already.
You're going to do it, we're going to do our bit, then you're going to moan and we're going to laugh, and then we'll just all forget about it and we'll come back next year.
Aye, but genuinely, it is a very tedious subject that comes up every single year. But I'm genuinely not sitting on the fence here. This is honestly what I believe. It's everyone has the right to do whatever they think it is appropriate for this. And you can say it's not political, it's about respect. Keep politics away from football, but no, we want to put politics into football, all that sort of stuff. But if you want to go and protest that, it is entirely your right to do so. Entirely your right to do so. However, if you also want to do that, if you want to go along and you hate that it gets disrupted and you wanted the chance to in some way mark your own respect, that's entirely fine as well. But you have to get used to that. You have to accept what other people want to do about it as well. Now, notice that there was a big old celebration of a victory for free speech just last week by the exact same people. A big victory in America.
Well, a lot of the same people.
Yeah,
let's not tar
of course,
the same brush.
of course, not all of the same people, but the most vocal about it on the likes of X, who will come on and call it a disgrace. We're indeed celebrating the fact that there was a big old victory for free speech when Elon and Donald pulled it off last week. Right? Oh, see, finally the truth, free speech and all that. But no, you can't say that 4 days later or whatever it is. So now, again, I completely support the right for anyone to protest that, and I reject the idea that, it's only a minute, you should just shut up. No, that is precisely the exact time to protest it. Correct. Because there's no point in not protesting the thing you're protesting against and then doing it some other time. That's the nature of a protest in itself. So I think you've got two choices here. One, you can stop forcing people to have minute silences at the football,
which is absurd in itself.
Yep.
Yeah, and I don't really agree with that, because I think it would be inappropriate to bow to protesters in that way. I'm just speaking from the other point of view here. But two, you have to accept what's going to happen, because you can't then turn around and do this pearl clutching, oh my God, I can't believe they've done this, because you know what's going to happen. You know those people are diametrically politically opposed to doing this, and you're ushering them into a building and then looking at them, hoping that they do something about it. So those are the two choices there. You either get rid of them altogether, or you just accept that people are going to protest. So that's really about it.
You're right, because I think, one, it's a nonsense to have a minute silence at a football game. I don't understand. Maybe someone will educate me as to why on Remembrance Sunday, when all the services happen at 11 o'clock, or on Armistice Day when it's the 11th minute of the 11th hour, why we then do that at 3 o'clock on a Sunday afternoon at Rugby Park, and then they do it at 5 o'clock at Ibrox, and then you're just bringing something into football that doesn't need to be there. But I will also criticise the referee for making the decision for ending it early.
Yeah.
I don't think the referee's got any right to do that, because perversely what I'm going to do is defend the people who, and the Celtic support as well, who want to observe that minute silence.
Yeah, that's
just because people are singing doesn't mean you don't get to observe your minute silence. And the referee had no right to end that game.
No.
There were people in that stadium on both sides, in both camps, both supporters groups, who were observing a minute silence, and the referee thought, don't like what they're doing, I'll pull it for everybody. And I just don't think the referee had the right to do that. But we've all had our say, and by Thursday, everyone will forget about
Aye.
it, and we'll be back next year. Many.
We need to call this what it is as well. This whole festival. It's like a crass exercise in competitive respecting as
Yes.
well. That's basically all it is, and it gets forced onto people who don't want it to be forced upon them, and they're always going to respond in that way. And again, I'm glad you said that. Just to reiterate, I completely support anyone's right to want to observe that as well, but you have to accept the environment that's going to happen. You can't control that. And you can't just call everyone a scumbag for not agreeing with you.
Aye, exactly. One final point for me is this whole thing was ruined by I don't know who organises it, Melly, or whose idea it was, or where it came from. But the whole thing was ruined a couple of years ago, or in the last decade, when it used to be for World War One and World War Two, and all the guys that were conscripted. Then they decided, no, we'll make it for all soldiers in all wars, without any consideration about how people might feel about what happened in Ireland. And that's seen as a somewhat controversial opinion in Scotland, which is, it's anti-democratic for you to say, you're not allowed to hold this opinion. Yes, bad things happened. Yes, people got sent to jail for what they did in Ireland, but you must respect it, or God help you. It's perverse and weird.
It's strange, and that's the whole point. Every year, I like when this time comes along, because you go, James McLean is still kicking a ball. He's still going, because he gets wheeled out every year. He has to go out there and defend himself every year. Reporters, newspapers put up these stories about him, put up pictures of this guy who is standing away from it. He's standing up for what he believes in. You highlight this every year. His family get death threats every single year.
Every year's the Instagram post explaining himself once again.
He comes out explaining very well every single year why he doesn't do that, and that's his reasoning, because it was changed years ago from something to something that he can no longer believe in, and that is fine. That is his opinion.
Yeah.
Why can't my opinion be respected, or other people's be respected? Derek McInnes came out there and told people to respect something. How can you respect something but I can't respect what I believe in? It's utter nonsense, and he couldn't wait to get out there just to bring that up. Nobody asked him about it.
No, I couldn't. He couldn't keep his powder dry for.
He switched like that. So at 1 second he was being
like it.
actually very diplomatic about the Real HATATE potential red card incident. So I mean, I think for modern or current standards that probably is a red card. But what Derek McInnes, he made an actually good point. He said he didn't really see that there was much in it. There wasn't that much force in it, but I thought it would go to VAR, and usually what happens with VAR is they see the slowdown, the stills and all that, and it always looks worse. And then Celtic cancelled our minute silence.
Do you know what he reminded me of? Remember that Australian politician? He's talking about one thing and then he starts talking about dogs or something. He just totally switches.
With the back.
Aye, very, very, very bizarre for Derek McInnes. Look, final word on it for me is, my position broadly is, you must allow people to have freedom of expression.
Yeah.
And I've during this rant, it should be clear to everyone listening that if you support it, that's fine. If you don't support it, that's fine. But everyone should be allowed their opinion. And the minute you drag it into the football, the minute you drag it into you place those politics into football, they were added to football. If this wasn't brought up, people wouldn't have it on their own accord. You brought it into football, and everyone in that stadium who paid their money is allowed to make their voice heard. That's the rules. And if you don't like it, you'll need to come up with some other way to work it.
Yeah, and look, Celtic are in a position where they have a lot of people with families, Irish and all that, but the difficulty is Celtic didn't go out there, or Celtic fans didn't go out there and just simply boo a minute's silence. They sang a song about why they protest the minute silence, therefore raising awareness. It wasn't just
literally wouldn't be silenced. Symbolically, they were told to be silent, and they didn't do it. They didn't boo. They just kept.
They sang into Mark Gillespie for a reason. That guy was charged with manslaughter. It's like, it's not a political opinion. It's fact, and facts don't care about your feelings. Okay, that's how it works. And like, there's a big point we're missing here, right? Minute silences. Absolute woke nonsense. That's enough on that. The more important stuff is, did you see the Peter Schmeichel press conference? There's a rumour going about Mark Melly that Peter Schmeichel doesn't really get on with referees. Apparently he treats them with absolute contempt.
How's he got in there?
Did I say Peter?
Yeah.
Twice. Oh no, it's all that poppy stuff. It's got in my brain.
Weirdly, his son seems to take after him in that.
Yeah.
We'll save that.
That's a segue, yeah. So Kasper, there's a rumour going about that Kasper doesn't like referees. He treats them with utter contempt. And after seeing the press conference, pre-match, I got a wee flavour of that. He sort of, a press guy said to him, looking back on such and such, and he more or less said, I don't look back, mate. I don't look back. He goes, okay, so looking forward. He goes, I don't look forward either. And he goes, okay, so at the moment, what do you think? He goes, you know what? I don't even think about that either. I just focus on the game when I'm in the game, and that's all that matters. And he just didn't want to answer anything. But during that game, he was excellent. And he's pulled off a couple of cracking saves for us over the past couple of weeks. And we're looking at the transfer window, and he came in for the least amount of money to be paid.
Zero.
Yeah. It was free. I couldn't remember if we paid or if he was free. And he's starting to look like an inspired piece of recruitment.
He does. He's been absolutely brilliant. And I think along the season, we can see with his passing what a different dimension it brings to Celtic. I don't believe Celtic get that result against Leipzig without him. If we'd have swapped him for Joe Hart, I think the result would be very different. Not that I don't love Joe Hart, but what he brings to us with his passing is brilliant. He has made decent saves. I wouldn't say he's really made any saves that he shouldn't have made so far. Shows he's a good keeper because he's not letting any poor ones, aka Barkas. But with the performance at the weekend, it was a kind of match-winning performance from the goalkeeper. I thought he was absolutely outstanding. Some great saves when Celtic were under the cosh. Like, Kilmarnock are a big side. They're going to be throwing things at us. Derek McInnes did bring it up after the match. They beat us on XG. Well done, Derek. Hey, XG in minutes silences you beat us on, but you couldn't get
that'll be the single
silences. Expected grievance.
He will never mention expected goals again in his career, apart from having done it against Celtic.
No, but Kasper has been an inspired signing. We go back to the time when we brought him in. We were all, I was anyway, like we said, right, all the goalkeepers in the world, and the one we've come up with is the guy that's worked with the manager before. So it didn't look, but he's come in, he's been brilliant, and that game over the past week is really showing, like, is he the best summer signing?
I mean, there's certainly a case to be made for it in terms of...
So who's he up against?
Engels, not yet. Ida, Bernardo,
Austin Trusty's
Austin Trusty's right up there as well. It could be Schmeichel in terms of importance, in terms of impact so far. And
maybe my favourite one.
He must have played every minute, I'm assuming, by now as well. So yeah, in terms of his performance, I think he's been absolutely sensational. I think he probably is the most important summer signing so far. I think there was that save against Kilmarnock, where was it Kennedy who kind of cut into the box and Schmeichel got down to it. Reminded me quite a lot of, remember at Pataudry, was that last season, where I think
was it Miovski went for it?
Someone come in and have left. Who's that midfielder? What's his name again? Aberdeen midfielder. Shinnie came in off the left onto his right foot, and Joe Hart pulled off an absolutely brilliant save. Reminded me a lot of that. And it won't. I mean, that was a huge save in terms of determining where the title was going to go. That was brilliant. But that might not be the case with the Kilmarnock game. But for that moment, when Kilmarnock looked as if they might sneak back into it, because, as they say, they were strolling it in the expected goals and creating chances and all that, a huge moment. And it's one of very many with Schmeichel so far. Even then, when Kilmarnock hit the post, Chris Boyd said that he should have scored there. And I think that's what people say when there's a chance like that, clean through. But see, when you look at the replay, I thought, well, Schmeichel has positioned his body in such a way that if that was closer to going into the net, it would have hit Schmeichel in the body. So he's put it in the only place directly between his hip and arm, and it sort of bobbled onto the post. If he hits that any closer to going into the net, Schmeichel saves it. So just a really... You couldn't possibly call him underrated, because you can't miss Kasper Schmeichel on the pitch in a lot of ways. He's a big presence in a lot of ways, but it was good to see him absolutely furious at that. Someone just basically tried to elbow his nose off towards the end of the game. He was absolutely raging with him. So a big personality in there.
His distribution's really changed the way Celtic can approach these games as well.
Definitely has, and I wonder if this can't be the norm, because he's really good at it. We see this in the highest level of football where goalkeepers can do this, but we have never seen this. A guy that can just chip balls into players and take out 3-4 players by passing it. Even the wee turn he done the other day. If Craig Gordon had attempted that while at Celtic,
took a guy down and he would have kicked him in the face or something.
His knees would have exploded again. Craig Gordon.
Craigie went up for a corner at the weekend against Rangers. I was like, we went full circle here. But Kasper's been absolutely brilliant as well with the passing, but again, we've got used to that with him. but seeing him pull off saves like that was utterly brilliant. You could say he lit up my day.
Oh, that's right. And on that, come back next week to find out what melee means. Right? Patreon.com/20minute Tims, where you can support us and get extra podcast videos and writing. See you next week.